What then explains the sudden evaporation of interest on the high cost of living? For example, cabbage, which was retailing at, which is a basic food, may I say, for many Kenyans. It's been on the increase since the same time last year, and the prices of other basic commodities, which are very important to the Kenyan people. Why then the sudden forgetfulness and evaporation of these issues, which are of concern to the Kenyan people, and now talks revolving on how a parliamentary process, which is bipartisan, according to the leaders of both coalitions, I mean, for both ends of the political divide, will center on, for example, the Poll Commission, IEBC, which has its own set of recommendations, as made in the Kriegler report, that no major changes ought to be made 2 years before the elections. You fight against corruption as laid out in the Constitution. There is an established body, the ACC, which fights corruption in the country. I mean, how do they reorient and get back to the discussions of concern, which is about high cost of living and the economy?
Ayub, in this country, you don't even need to literally meet citizens every other day as a leader to tell them what the problem is. Already, like just reading today's paper, every other day when you read the newspaper, and you even check out the news stories that run in the different media station, you get to understand what's happening in the country. Food security is still a very big issue in this country. Like we should not be talking about citizens, whether it's from the north or from wherever, urban communities or rural communities, going to bed hungry, because right to food is a right you should actually enjoy. When it comes to access to water, I think last month we had World Water Day, and we had all these stories about citizens who are struggling to even access water. And I think I read the statistics in terms of 28 million Kenyans cannot access clean water. 28 million Kenyans, that is about half the population we are talking about. And we saw stories connected to how even young girls are missing school because they have to go look for water. They have to walk those long distances to go look for water. The impact of us not thinking about the different strands when it comes to the high cost of living and how it affects citizens, and how that is layered in terms of the different clusters. When you look at whether it is young people, when you look at the elderly, the issue about the elderly in this country, how are we taking care of the elderly in this in this country? Okay. So I think it's it's about balancing personal interest and collective interest, because you can actually literally see if you're already having a challenge with figuring out whether this leader cares about our collective interest or they care about their political interests. It already tells you where their interests are, because someone literally who cares about the citizens' interest, who cares about why they were elected, because when people were campaigning, when the leaders were campaigning, they campaigned on the basis of them understanding the issues that affect us every other day. The reason you went out, you woke up early in the morning to go vote for this leader is because you felt they actually understand what my issues are. They actually understand what is affecting this community. That is where you went and saw a very long list of members of county assembly, members of parliament, the president, the governors, and you decided, I'm going to vote here because they understand what issues are, my concerns. And maybe there could be money influence, but at the end of the day, if both leaders were giving, like distributing money, they see that leader who's talking about the issues that are, that affect you. So it's how then do they balance those interests? Okay.
And Bina, you mentioned food security. Galana Kulalu was a well-conceived project by the Jubilee administration. It collapsed because of corruption. And state officials calling for 10%, forcing the Israeli company to pull back, and the ambassador saying that I should get back to my country, under then Prime Minister, now Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Allow me to read this report by the National Assembly Committee on Environment, which is still on corruption, because that is one, food security, and here is also money meant for development, which apparently cannot be accounted for. In a report by the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, tabled in the House in October 2019, for the financial year 16-17, 17-18, the National Treasury released 120 billion to fund the construction of 8 mega dams in the country, none of which has and may never come to pass. Mathematically, that means that in just 2 years, an average of 60 billion got lost in 1 year, 5 billion every month, 1.7 billion every day, and 70 million Kenya shillings disappearing every single hour under the then Jubilee government. Where is accountability?
There's no accountability.
What needs to happen then? Because if there's no accountability from the political establishment, we are constitutional democracy. It's the Kenyan people who donate that power to the politicians who make all these policies. And when there seems to be no interest from the politicians and we lose a third of our budget to corruption, and there seems to be no clear interest and willing from the administration to fight corruption, which is corroding our institutions, what then needs to happen?
I think, you know, even the fact that we would have the former president talk about us losing 2 billion a day, you know, and talk about it lightly. It just talks about how we don't take the issues of corruption seriously and the impact of corruption when it comes to our economy. Because, you know, when you talk about the Kulalu, you know, that directly impacts food security projects in this country. We shouldn't even be struggling with, you know, 100% the issues we're having currently when it comes to food security. I'm already reading here today's paper about Kenya stadium millionaires. You know, I have not even, you know, opened this particular story, but then this is again resources that we are losing, and these are leaders who've been to power, and we're not holding them accountable. And even when it comes to investigation, sometimes I think we also don't produce like adequate evidence, and we need to follow all these issues to the letter to ensure that after we've actually ensured that the evidence we have is correct, how then do we go ahead and prosecute? Because also Kenyans have never seen or experienced a high-profile leader being prosecuted for corruption scandals. And perhaps, you know, Javas can tell me, maybe there are some that have been prosecuted. But most of the leaders that we are talking about actually have corruption scandals. And I don't think we take accountability seriously as leaders. And even apart from that, Ayub also wanted to talk to the fact that when it comes to transitioning to a new government, how do we also ensure that projects don't stall? Because also one challenge that we have is when we have new leaders occupy office. So because Javas was a governor and now he's out of office or he's finished his term, and then I come to office. So you don't want to continue with these projects. How then do we put policies in place? How do we ensure that you don't let projects stall because you did not initiate those projects? Because we have so much resources that are put into this development, issues in the community. I read a report that shows that we lose about 9 trillion because of stalled projects in this country. Like so far, the amount of money we've lost between Kibaki's regime and the current regime is about 9 trillion, just because of stalled project. Because the leader occupies office, comes to office, and they do not want to continue with the projects that another leader initiated. That speaks to you just thinking about yourself and all the citizens who actually wanted that project to take place in the first place.
Okay.